Assalamu alaikum
وعليكم السلام يا دكتور مهان.
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
حياك الله.
Allah yusallimak.
Allah يخليك. By God's grace, we have lived to witness the 23rd night of
MashaAllah.
Ramadan.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. And it's, we are, again, we will obviously never be able to exhaust the jewels and the mysteries and the open questions and the controversies of this incredible book. But what an incredible opportunity you've given me and you've given all of us by committing yourself and me to this incredible process.
Stop saying that. You gave us the opportunity by giving.
No, Jazakallah khair. I'm really grateful. I'm profoundly grateful for this opportunity.
But I'm really nervous about tonight. I think we could spend the rest of Ramadan talking about Surah Al-Ahzab.
Yeah, and in fact, I'm not ready to leave it. So maybe after the video tonight, we will we'll go back and visit Surah Al-Ahzab.
No, we haven't done it yet.
Oh, I guess because of all of my notes, I guess I was under the false impression that we had already done it. But let's again, quality over quantity, and let's see where the Spirit takes us tonight, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Oh yes. Okay, good. I see many of my highlighted jewels that we never discussed. So forgive me. I think the fatigue of the journey is blurring my memory of what we've actually discussed and what we haven't. But very good.
Yeah.
The mission and vision of the American Islamic College, to me, pretty much now synonymous with the work. I believe in the transformative power of education, and not just education that is informative, but in education that is transformative, education that really changes how we live. But I think that the Muslims of America need a place that they can come as a Muslim space. This is their space. It belongs to them.
Yes, and once again, I have to correct myself when I say that the American Islamic College doesn't belong to them. It belongs to everyone on this call. It belongs to you. And so this is, it's time for us to get beyond this idea that the American Islamic College belongs to someone else. This belongs to the community in all of its wondrous diversity. And we hope and pray that, that the American Islamic College will continue to grow and to become, a great American, unapologetically Muslim university for the benefit of the entirety of the Muslim mosaic, but also, for the benefit of the nation and the world as a whole, because this is like the Qur'an itself, right? The American Islamic College was established to be of benefit to everyone, and so we're grateful that to be a small part of it, and we invite everyone here to become part of it, either by enrolling or by contributing in some way, shape, or form. We this dream will get better and will get more beautiful as we come together and form an increasingly beautiful and luminous collective dream. So it's not my college, it's our college. And so please receive that as in the sincerity that I offer it. So yes, what a privilege. Here we are, night 23.
Yeah, still now we're a couple of ajza,
portions behind.
8 parts behind, But I think there's a little bit in the middle. We may be able to race through, and we may spend more time on any one particular night before it ends, just so we can have the pleasure and the satisfaction of, in one form or another, completion, even if it's not entirely comprehensive. But here we are at Surah Al-Ahzab, the Confederates. This surah,
We're 33.
number 33.
Yes.
And it's this was a make or break moment for the prophetic community in Medina. They had fought in many skirmishes and two major battles. They've been mentioned before. Badr, which was early on, and the lead up to it, and then its events. The lead up to it is in Al-Baqarah, the second chapter. The events are described in Al-Anfal, the aftermath in Al Imran. So they're scattered, about. The aftermath of the second battle, Uhud, is in Al Imran. So we've heard references to these battles. We haven't talked about them sequentially or comprehensively. That's maybe the domain of the seerah, but we can the seerah meaning the prophetic biography. But we can also do it in the context of reading the Qur'an. We just need a lot more time. But just that being said, we're in the third major battle. The Prophet and his companions are in Medina, and the Quraysh, his tribe from Mecca, from the land that one could say, fled or emigrated from, they have banded together with a bunch of allies, the Confederates, the Azab, and they're marching towards Medina to annihilate this nascent kind of movement that's challenging their religion and challenging the status quo of privilege that's enjoyed by the elites. And so the events of that in here are really, really, jarring in a way. There's lots of dissension. There's a sense that they actually, could be wiped out. There's extreme hunger. There's a siege of the city, and we'll read. We may not be able to read it, but there's two groups. They interpret the exact same events in two different ways. One group says, "Is this what you promised us, Prophet? Like, you brought us to ruin." And the other group, which is right at this moment of ultimate, make or break, says, "This is what you promised us. The trial, and we're ready." And so the point of that is, events make clear where people stand, and that's part of what these trials are there to reveal. And it begins, there are other things that happen in the surah, some personal matters relating to the Prophet and his family, and so and then the universal, the dispensation being a universal dispensation, for all peoples, and the Prophet being sent as a blazing lamp for the world. And in this, very personal example of his family, but also in this very public, confrontation with forces that want to annihilate them. There's an example for the prophet in terms of how he stands, the best example. So that those verses are coming in the surah.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'll cover it, but I just want to start with just the beginning, and I'll stop talking. I want to turn it over to you. But Bismillah Rahim. Ya ayyuhan Nabi, like the surah begins with, "O Prophet, don't fear God, ittaqillah," or have this reverence of God. وَلَا تُطِعِ الْكَافِرِينَ وَالْمُنَافِقِينَ, and don't pay heed to the ingrates and the hypocrites, because when push comes to shove, you want to give a little bit, and in order to accommodate, because you're being pragmatic and you realize that this is the world, and the God is saying, "No way, don't pay heed, stand firm." It's just really remarkable beginning. وَاتَّبِعْ مَا يُوحَى إِلَيْكَ, but rather follow that which is revealed to you from your Lord. Yeah. So that's my kind of inroad into this. But I don't know where you want to take us. Yeah, Sheikh.
Well, you should take us at least till the end of the third ayah there. Can you? Because I think that this kind of sets the stage.
Right. So, Inna Allah kana bima ta'maluna khabira. So God is well aware of what you do. And then the third verse is just وَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ.
Mm.
This is just so great. You know, it's such a reminder to me. Put your trust in God.
Yeah.
You know, we're always calculating and I don't know, we're trying to be worldly wise, right? And we have to be because we don't want to be dumb. But at some point, you know, you got to call a spade and just let the chips fall where they may and just put your trust in God. وَكَفَى بِاللَّهِ وَكِيلًا. And God is enough as a disposer of affairs, as one to put your trust in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, I mean, there's so many things in this chapter. There obviously is a problem also with regard to hypocrites who are in their midst in Medina, right, in this besieged city, who are actually giving access and giving information to the enemies who are besieging it. And there's some beautiful statements about the fact that, you know, even people are running away from the battle, but it says in ayah 16 that, you know, that you know, there's no running from God, right? You can't run from God. So God is going to find you wherever you go. But there's a beautiful ayah here, just in the very beginning, that I wanted to ask you what you think of it, when it says that the prophet is closer to the believers than they are to themselves, right? And so this is the sixth verse. And then his wives are, of course, their mothers, like the mothers of the believers. This is how we are taught to refer to the you know, to the wives of the prophet, that they are the mothers of the believers. And so after the prophet passed away, you know, alayhi salatu wassalam, his widows did not marry again. And but the thing I wanted to focus on is not the wives portion, but the statement that the prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves. How do you make sense of that?
Yeah. Awla. Closer to the believers. I'm going to, you put me on the spot, so I'm just going to turn to the study Qur'an, if it's okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It says, could also be rendered more worthy of the believers, meaning he has more right over them than they have over themselves. So when he says you have to obey.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read it that way. Awlul mu'minin.
How do you read it?
Yeah, no, that's also that also means that in a moment of war that you know, people should recognize his absolute authority in this moment of crisis.
I mean, it's a long commentary, so there are other ways to read it. One is this, you know, sense of full surrender and submission in terms of obedience. When it's a prophetic command, you know, the prophet also said he offered things that were culturally salient, but not necessarily divine commands. Like when he saw people pollinating the trees, he's like, why do you do that? You know, what if you didn't do that? And there's a casual remark, and they didn't do it that year, and they had loss of yield, crop for the dates. And when he found out, it was because he had said it. He said, look, antum a'lamu bi umuri dunyakum. Like, you know better about your worldly affairs. I didn't mean it like that. It was just a curiosity. But when this verse also comes, I believe, in the surah, that when the God and the messenger decree something, there's no choice.
Right.
You have to follow it. And so that's one sense. But then also in a more maybe spiritual sense, there's the hadith that none of you truly believes until I am more beloved to him than his own self, his wealth, his children, and all mankind, and mankind altogether. This is the Prophet.
Mm.
And so, even if we look at the verse that comes before it, number
Yeah.
4, I'm reading it actually in light of that now, because I was wondering about that. God does not put two hearts within a man's breast. Did you
Right.
see that? Number 4.
Yeah.
ما
Yeah.
جعل الله لرجل من قلبين في جوفه. And
No.
there's a whole slew of interpretations of this as well. But in the sense that, you can really have one purpose in life. But you better be clear about it. And so if your self-interests in some way are greater than the interests of God and his messenger, with the messenger right in front of you, then there's a problem.
Mm.
Where's your heart? You don't have two hearts. And so where is it?
Yeah, that's really interesting, because it's later on we're going to see that the Qur'an, in addressing the wives of the Prophet, the Qur'an is going to present a choice that is really the choice for all human beings, right? That you have to make a choice. Do you want the life of this world with all of its glitter, or are you seeking God and his messenger in the home of the hereafter? So in a way, that choice is not just for the wives of the Prophet, it's for or for the people of Medina at this time. It's kind of a choice. It's a choice for all people at all time. But to me, it also kind of raises this interesting question of the place of the Prophet in Islamic spirituality and in Islamic, in the hearts of Muslims. And and of course, in this chapter again, we have, ayah 21, when we read that, that the messenger of Allah is the uswa hasana, the beautiful role model, right? For the Muslims. And so for anyone whose hope is God in the final day, and who engages much in the praise of God, that's verse 21. So, there is a sense in which the Prophet, upon him be peace, is central to the way Muslims understand what it means to live a human life. And there is a, I guess there are many different answers, because there are many different interpretive streams of Islam and many different temperaments. But the love of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, is a universal Muslim value. And it's and it's not by way of deifying the Prophet, or of exempting him from his human nature, but it's something that's just really palpable. And as for me, learning Islam, as a young adult, I found myself, in Singapore and in Pakistan and all these other venues, these gatherings where it's just, singing, asking for God's blessings, the salawat of God upon the Prophet, and this love of the Prophet, and the songs and poems about the Prophet, and this it's something which is clearly it's cultivated, but it's also just irrepressible. It's so, and I think this idea of the Prophet as the uswa hasan, as the beautiful role model, kind of places him very centrally in the way Muslims think about walking the walk, and what it means to live a life of faith.
Yeah, no, that's I think that's definitely a key part of this surah, that the verse you identified, which is verse number 21.
Yeah.
لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ.
Yeah.
The messenger of God is an excellent role model, or you have indeed in the messenger of Allah a beautiful pattern of conduct. for any one whose hope is in Allah and the final day, right? God and the last day,
Yeah.
and who engage much in the praise of Allah. And later on, there'll also be the sequence of verses. Inna arsalnaka shahidan wa mubashiran wa nadhiran. Where is that? That's verse number 45.
Yeah, that we've sent you as someone proclaiming a warning as well as good news.
Yeah, we have sent thee as a witness, shahidan wa mubashiran, as a bearer of glad tidings, wa nadhiran, and as a warner, wa da'iyan ilallahi bi'idhnihi, and as one who summons, who calls people, invites people to Allah, or to Allah's grace by His leave.
Yes, wasirajan munir.
Wasirajan muniran, and a light-giving lamp, a blazing lamp.
Yeah.
And so the surah is, definitely revolving around the Prophet. But here's, his example. I want to turn back to the verse you said. I really liked the reading that when, the wives are given this, that if you want the glitter of this world, then come, I will give it to you and I will release you, in the best way. But if you want God and his messenger, then that's your choice. And with God and his messenger, part of what's happening is there's all these hardships, right? And the Prophet didn't amass wealth, and he didn't personally enrich himself with the spoils of war, or with, he didn't spend time in business and trade and the comforts of this world. And so but the community was getting more and more prosperous. And so part of that was some of the wives started to ask, like, don't we have another portion? And the Prophet said, that's not for us. And there are all these interesting stories about, they would sometimes spend days going hungry, and the Prophet wouldn't keep anything that came to him overnight. And once, he woke up and he was greatly troubled because he had kept something overnight without having given it away. And so symbolic poverty was part of the Prophet's uswa, like part of his example. And we forget that he was in the middle of such a tremendous struggle and living in poverty, and that is his example, right? And so his example, viewed today, often is around so much opulence and comfort, and if you visit many of the places where people sing his praises, and God bless them, but it's like an abundance of wealth and luxury, and then there's a performative aspect, but there's so much else happening in the surah in terms of you will be tested with hunger and fear and hardship, and glad tidings to those who persevere, because he spent his life trying to set the world aright, and whoever tries to do that, we know, faces tremendous hardship.
Yeah.
And there's that part of the role model also is, I believe, that something that the surah is reminding us of.
Yeah. And then also his role among the prophets is also mentioned in this surah, when we read that he was the seal of the prophets, Khatam an-Nabiyyin. And so it's interesting, like his unique positionality is referred to in several different ways and in several different contexts here, but the and we can talk more about him being the seal of the prophets as we go forward. But it's there's a tremendous amount happening here.
Yes, which is why I was extremely nervous about getting into this, and we're not moving systematically.
But no, we're not moving systematically. But I think that this is a big question, right? Who is the Prophet Muhammad? Alayhi salatu wassalam, upon him be peace. like as a human, and in relation to the other prophets, and in relation to the average, to the everyday believer, his centrality in all of those spheres is really clearly articulated here.
Yeah. No. And this, the ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم. So Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. There's actually a book by this title. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a revisionist history. But the argument that book makes is that if I remember correctly, I should be careful. But that this part of the question here was on succession. That who would succeed the Prophet, and there was the whole question of his adopted son. Now, in our tradition, we don't discuss it through the through the prism of succession, but through the Prophet's marriage to Zainab, because the Prophet had an adopted son, and the adopted son was married to a noblewoman, and the adopted son was, had been erstwhile a slave who had been set free. And so there was a huge distinction in terms of the social hierarchy between the husband and the wife, and that bond kind of struggled to maintain itself. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this actually, I think, at the very beginning, let me see that verse 4 again. No, it's not there, but
I think it's 37 where
that 37 is where we were.
Where it discusses the marriage to Zainab.
Yes. And so eventually he divorces her, the son divorces his wife, and the Prophet marries her. And there's a lot of discussion on a controversial discussion on this. First of all, you're not allowed to marry a divorced wife of your child, and the other way around either. And so it was explained that adoptive children are not your children. You should call them by their names. That also appears in the surah, and that doesn't change the relations that are of blood. And then that episode here is being explained, like you said, in verse 30. Was it 37?
37 is where we start to see the marriage to Zainab being discussed. Yeah.
When you, Prophet, said to the man who had been favored by God, which was his adopted son, and by you, because the Prophet had honored him as keeping him in his household, keep your wife. So this is the text from verse 37, and be mindful of God. You hid in your heart what God would later reveal. You were afraid of people, but it is more fitting that you fear God. When Zayd no longer wanted her, we gave her to you in marriage, so that there might be no fault in believers marrying the wives of their adopted sons after they no longer wanted them. God's command must be carried out. The Prophet is not at fault for what God ordained for him, so God ordained it for him. This was God's practice with those who went before. God's command must be fulfilled. And all those who deliver God's messages and fear only him and no other, God's reckoning is enough. Muhammad is not the father of any of you men. So that's how it goes. Yeah.
Right, but he is the messenger of God and the seal of the prophets.
And the seal of the
Nabiyyin.
Yeah.
And God has full knowledge of all things. So turning for a second away from the marriage question and to the seal, the interpretation of the seal of the prophets has meant different things to different people. And
Sure.
And so many Muslims today will understand the khatam or seal to mean the last of the prophets. but I remember reading in a scholarly book called Prophecy Continuous. In the early medieval tafsir literature, there was not the consensus about last was not or at least they didn't read seal as being last, and so it's an interesting point of exegetical, let's say, differences of opinion. But
Right.
but I've always taken seal to sort of mean that he comes to clarify and verify and affirm and confirm what the prophets before him brought and taught, and so there is a kind of corrective role that the Qur'an plays with regard to what it perceives to be misunderstandings with regard to Jesus's mission and Jesus's identity and other kinds of theological questions. But this language of the seal of the prophets is is rich and gives rise to a whole wealth of interpretation.
Right. Yeah, and here, in the study of Quran, it says that it refers to the prophet's relationship. No, wait, right below there, that the prophet is the seal of the prophets is understood to mean that he is the last prophet sent to humanity. So that's the general meaning, and then it elaborates. The most frequently cited hadith pertaining to his place as the seal of the prophet states, "My likeness among the prophets before me is that of a man who has built a house, completed it, and beautified it, yet left empty a place for a brick. Then the people come to the house, are amazed by it, and say, 'If only you were to place this brick, your house would be complete. I am this brick.'" Have you ever heard that one before?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful hadith.
Yeah. According to the prophet, being the seal of the prophets is one of 6 qualities that distinguish him from other prophets. Should I read this? It's just basically quick.
Sure.
6 things. I have been favored above the prophets in 6 things. I've been endowed with consummate succinctness of speech. I have been made triumphant through dread. War booty has been made lawful for me. The whole earth has been made a place of worship for me and a means of purification. I have been sent to all created beings, and the succession of prophets has been completed in me.
Wow.
Those are the 6 things.
Yeah, we may not get beyond this surah tonight because there's so much here. Okay, can we go back and speak about ayah 30, ayah 35?
Yes.
This is. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just want to set it up in comparison to Surah Nur, but after
Okay.
you.
No, go ahead.
Well, the verse 35 in Surah Al-Ahzab, this surah we're reading right now, is a jewel, right? Somewhat in the center of the surah. And it's very similar to the center of the surah we read in Surah Nur, with Ayatul Nur, the light verse. God
Right.
is the light of the heavens and the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, listening and following the Israrian kind of school, which I think works with, I don't know if Islahi said the exact same thing, but I have this from Dr. Israr. He said that you have a slate of Meccan surahs, 13 of them, and then one Medinan surah, which was Nur. And then you have a group of Meccan surahs, 8 of them, and then you have one Medinan surah, which is Ahzab. And he says Nur and Ahzab have a very close correlation with each other. In fact, Ahzab was revealed a year before Nur. And so it has the initial commands for even, some gender relations in terms of going out of the house and dress. And then Nur has some later commands of, who is allowed as a mahram inside the house. And so there's this complementarity. But most interestingly, in Surah Nur, you have the light verse, which is the metaphor for iman, right?
For belief.
For inner belief in the heart of a believer, if we were to accept that. And that's verse number 35. In an Ahzab, the same verse number 35 is what happens to that belief when it reaches outward into the world. What kinds of characteristics does it exhibit? And it's equal for both men and women, which is made explicit in verse number 35. So we can read this as the fruits of inner faith, how they will manifest. That's perhaps one way to look at it. It's a nice poetic way.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
So what translation do you have? I have Abdullah Yusuf Ali here, and then also the linguistically it's very simple and very beautiful in Arabic. So
yes,
we can even just do a sight read here, but it's so surely for Muslim men and for Muslim women, for believing men and believing women, for devout men and devout women, for truthful men and truthful women, for patient men and patient women, right? For humble men and for humble women, for men and women who give charity, right? For men and women who fast, and kind of I think fast is good. For men and women who are modest and they guard their chastity, and for men and women who remember God often, and for them and in praise for them, God has for them, I guess God has for them forgiveness, right? And a great reward.
Yes.
Like a momentous reward. So it's this is one of those beautiful verses where it's made very explicit, right? That women and men are being considered equally in the Qur'an, in terms of virtue, in terms of reward, in terms of spiritual quality.
Right.
And
and much of the Quran, this relates to a question that came before as well, when one of our members in the audience asked Dr. Faryal, like, when you hear the Quran, does it sound like God is a masculine God, if I heard his question correctly? But the way the question is often posed, and it was posed to the Prophet himself, that it's as if God is addressing men only, because it's typically the masculine pronoun that's used, Muslimun. And the Prophet explains that it's inclusive, because the masculine pronoun linguistically encompasses both genders. But when you use the feminine, the plural. When you use the feminine plural, it's exclusive to the feminine, to the females. But when you use the masculine, it's gender inclusive. And so in response to that question, this verse came down where it actually made it explicit. Innal muslimin wal muslimat. So but both pronouns were used as if to make clear, no, this is not just addressing the men. Don't get confused by that linguistic marker. This is for everybody. Innal muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat wal qanitina wal qanitat. And there's that word, the qanitin. Remember we read in the controversial 434, obedient not to the husband but to God.
That's right.
That's how it's used. Was-sadiqina was-sadiqat was-sabirina was-sabirat والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما. So it's a beautiful, verse that it makes it absolutely clear that this is not gender exclusive address.
Right, and that certainly supports what Dr. Farial said about the way she reads the Quran. That when she reads the Quran, she sees it addressing all humankind and not just men.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the next verse actually continues that the use of both in the singular. ما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم. So when God and his messenger have decided on a matter that concerns them, it is not fitting for any believing man or woman to claim freedom of choice in the matter.
Right.
So this is one of the verses that is used, when the ahkam, when the commands of God are derived, that following the principles of interpretation that have been established, that if it's a categorical command, then it becomes what's called ma'lum min ad-din bid-darura, like it's something that's known by necessity and there's no choice, you have to follow it, which is a matter of debate now, because it's up to interpretation, how you read that and to what extent do you apply context, historical context.
Right, but it also kind of underscores the idea that when there's prophecy, it's not a democracy, right? It's that when you have someone who has this unique standing between humankind and the Creator, it's not a democracy. Even though the Prophet Muhammad was very consultative in the way he solicited the opinions of the people around him and his wives, even very consultative and very open to their ideas, but there is a in some issues, right, there's kind of a hard stop, and there's some areas where there's no room for debate.
Yeah. And this, this makes some people nervous, because what happens is, an authority will read the text, derive a meaning that's fairly exclusive, and say, now you have no choice in it because this is what God has said.
Right.
And so I struggle with that now.
No, and I think rightly so, and I think that it's different if it's someone trying to push their interpretation of a passage on you and trying to do so with infallible authority, and or whether it's something that's just really, really clearly articulated in the book itself, and so we have to, as like this kind of authority stops with the prophet, right? And so other people, in the aftermath of prophecy, nobody can wield this kind of authority. And you're right, there are many legitimate readings of passages that sometimes are taken as being unidimensional. Just there's only one way to read it. And there are some people who read the entire text that way. But one of the things that we're discovering is that even as we're reading it, is that it just, sometimes there are bewildering number of possibilities and ways that we can understand particular verses and particular references. So it's, but ultimately, that's it. The prophets don't come to say, hey guys, God was thinking that if you guys are okay with it, that maybe we'll do it, this way. This isn't the way the prophet, even if they want to talk that way, to kind of,
Right.
be conciliatory. In the Quran sometimes is even sort of chiding the prophet and saying, no, look, right, you shouldn't be worried about whether they're going to be okay with this or not,
Right.
and that you should just deliver the message. And so there is something that's more forceful about the prophetic event. And but you're also right in that there are plenty of people in the aftermath of prophecy who want to take up that mantle of authority and wield it as if it's their own, and that's a dangerous thing.
Should we, mindful of time, should we wrap up by reading a section of this, or do you want to cover other specific nuggets?
Well, no, I think the only other piece that I really, that made me pause was this idea of the trust for humankind, and that's coming
I'm looking
at
at
the
that.
end. This idea that this idea of the burden of stewardship, right, in the creation, the burden of the khilafah that God had offered it to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but everything in the creation refused to accept the trust, except for the human being.
Yes.
And I'll do it.
What is that trust?
That has to me, the only way this makes sense is the responsibility of stewardship. This is, we offered the amana, right, to the heavens and to the earth and to the mountains, but nothing in the creation was strong enough or crazy enough or reckless enough or to accept it, but the human being did. And so I think this points, I think, to that, again, that unique capacity that humans have been given in the Quran, but we also have that capacity to be the asfal safilin, the lowest of the low. So we're kind of humans, the human being in his or her most beautiful form is a theocentric creature that has the capacity, a limited capacity, but still a capacity to manifest God's own qualities like mercy and justice and knowledge and wisdom. And in so doing has the responsibility to take care of the creation on God's behalf. And so that's, are you seeing other references to the trust that are outside of that notion of the khilafah or the vicegerency or the stewardship?
There's quite a, not a lot, but a number of possibilities here that I'm looking at. And let me read the translation of the verse. Truly, we offered the trust unto the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused to bear it and were weary of it. Yet man bore it. Truly, he has proved himself an ignorant wrongdoer. So, the trust can also be understood as pertaining to the manner in which one manages each aspects of one's being. There's a number of reasons given here. The trust was offered to the heavens and the earth and the mountains is taken literally by many commentators, but is understood by some to mean that it was offered to their inhabitants. That is, to all the people of the earth, the jinn and the angels. They refused to bear it, not out of defiance, but because they shrank from what they knew to be too heavy a burden. Many understand this to mean that they knew they would be subject to reward and punishment, and thus chose to remain passively obedient rather than risk the consequences of being held accountable before God. It's in the vein of how you read it. The responsibility of stewardship was too big for them. In the sense, the heavens, the earth, and the mountains saw their own weakness, But human beings realize their place and assume their responsibility as creatures possessing intellect and thus fit to observe the obligations of the deen, of religion. This passage can also be seen as a metaphorical account to show that the heavens, the earth, and the mountains, despite their tremendous size and magnificent bearing, do not have the capacity to undertake the burdens of revealed laws, as in, and this reference to the other verse 59:21, which we will read later. Had we sent this Qur'an descend upon a mountain, thou wouldst have seen it humbled, rent asunder by the fear of God. That man bore it thus indicates the unique responsibility human beings bear to remain in a state of tawheed, the oneness of God, upholding God's oneness, and to follow the practices of their respective religious laws. When they do not, they break the covenant they made with God before entering this world. That harkens back to the time in the primordial, existence, the alast, am I not your Lord? Thus fail to live in accordance with their true nature. Man has proved himself an ignorant wrongdoer insofar as he has failed to bear the full weight of the trust.
Yeah, I almost read this as a disjunction to say that, but the human being, al-insan, not man, but the human being, right?
Right.
Carried it. He took it upon himself, or the human being
Yeah.
took it upon himself or herself, and then, but, right? He was,
Right.
he was corrupt
He took-
and ignorant, right?
He took
Meaning
on
that,
too much.
that we
Yeah.
failed. We had the courage to take it, and yet we were, most of us are corrupt and ignorant.
What does that mean? Like, when we think of I mean, how do we how do we process that?
Well, it's, I think that for me, what comes to mind, because we have a kind of disjunct here between the courage and the capacity of the human being, and literally not just to take it, but to carry it, right? To shoulder it here. Hamala, to carry it. So there's a sense of the human being is like audacious and courageous and filled with idealism and lofty potential, but we're also asfala safilin, the lowest of the low, right? And so we have this bi-directional capacity where we can really shine and we can really disappoint. And
yeah, no, I'm following you.
That's how I see it.
Does this mean that we're really doomed to live in a world, like the angel said, full of mischief and blood, like an imperfect world, because that is the best field, the arena, the theater, to continue to test and bring out the best in those who are capable of rising above that in their personal submission and through their character? But ultimately, the world at large is going to be doomed because collectively we're not going to be able to bear what we've taken on. Do you follow?
Yeah. Although I think one of the things that comes out here too is the strength of the human being.
Yeah.
Right? That the human being, that as bad as it is, somehow, some way, we have the capacity to bear it, and whether the world is doomed or not, I think that one of the clear teachings in the Qur'an is that until God makes the creation anew, until Judgment Day, right, this world is going to be a theater of intense light and intense darkness, and profound tests and tragedies and successes and defeats, and it's this testing ground, and this is one of the reasons why the Qur'an keeps asking us not to put too much stock in the successes of this world, but to be clear about the fact that we're passing through on our way home to a place that's real and enduring. And but I think that we're obligated to try to make peace. I think we're obligated to try to and to strive to take care of the creation, but fixing it is something that only God can do.
Yeah, but I'm going to take you back to verse 23.
Okay.
That, and this is maybe just a closing thought, but you may want to carry us further. We're approaching the hour. But, could it be that in the striving to be caretakers, ultimately we're being tested to see who's going to give it all, who's going to give it their all, not that we'll actually succeed in bringing about a transformation in the world. And I take that indication both from the verse we just read, that man was foolish, he's not going to be able to bear it. The verse about the angels that we read will cause mischief and shed blood. And then now this verse 23.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Minal mu'minina rijal. So among the believers are men who have been true to their covenant with Allah. Some of them have completed their vow, which is, it's been fulfilled by death. And some are still waiting, means they've sacrificed it all. And some are waiting to be able to have an opportunity to give it their all. And is that really what we're called to do? And some of us hold back and we withdraw when the real, time to distinguish ourselves presents itself. I mean, I'm just asking maybe a very difficult question to myself, very publicly.
but it may be right. It may be that we will never be able to repair the world. We may never be able to establish, a world where everyone eats and a world where there's justice. But I think that we have the obligation to try and to give it all in the attempt. And I think that's the point, is that the world is now whatever it was before. And when we talk about the garden, like the state of the Garden of Eden, whatever it was before is now a dream that we can't go back to. And so the world, until its end, the world is going to be this, it's like a Rembrandt painting, a chiaroscuro, like intense darkness and intense light. And even when the prophets come into the picture, there's all this opposition that their very presence, incites and awakens. And so we live in a world of opposition and a world of light and darkness. And the light and darkness comes up even in this chapter again. The idea that God and the angels bring you out of the depths of darknesses and into the light. So there's this it's almost a Zoroastrian kind of palette of darkness and light, and this contest and battle between good and evil, and light and darkness. And that at some point is going to be reconciled, but not ultimately by us. It's going to be reconciled by the one who made it. And we'll make it again.
Yeah. And maybe this is the role model. This is the exemplar, the one who gives it all. And then that becomes, the witness and the blazing lamp. And maybe verse 56, it is on such a person, but in this case it's the Prophet, who is that to perfection, that God and his angels bless the Prophet.
Yeah.
God and his angels bless the Prophet. We're back to the centrality of, in all of this, both personal and very public struggle. God and his angels bless the Prophet. So, oh, you who believe, bless him too.
Yeah.
Sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima.
Abundantly.
And give him and salute him with respect, or give him greetings and salutations of peace.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to end tonight, I think.
Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad.
Ameen. Can you close us out with Surah Al-Asr? It's been a few nights since you've done that because we've been running beyond our hour, which we've done again tonight.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. By the passage of time through the ages, for by the time of the late afternoon, all of humankind is in loss, except for those who have believed and have righteous conduct, and exhort one another to living by what is good and true, and exhort one another to remaining patient and persevere in the face of adversity.
Ameen. Thank you.
Ameen.
Thank you, Dr. Mahan.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you who have joined us in real time or in your own time, which is still real. And we look forward, inshallah, to being with you for night 24 of Ramadan tomorrow night, if God wills, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.